I've been asked a number of times if I have any videos showing me building the rack from empty to full and then making a song out of it. And honestly, I've never really done that, come to think of it. I've done patches from scratch, but that's the rack already full of stuff. Before I continue with season 2 of my modular journey, I thought that I would show the demo rack. This is the rack that I do all these journey videos in, or most of them anyway, because it's nice and small. And the most important part is that I can get a camera in here, because right now the Blackmagic is sitting off to the side. It's not exactly a close-up. You know, my elbows keep getting in the way. The camera's just really too big to be doing something this close. So this is why I have reverted back to using my GoPro Hero 9, which is perfectly fine for these direct shots into the rack. So the GoPro just kind of hangs right here, aiming at the rack, and that's when you usually see me doing the work here. So that's at least the camera setup. I'll show a little bit more of the room. First, a quick overview of the studio and how I have everything set up. Nothing special here. It really is quite uncomfortable actually to do these videos because there is so much equipment packed around me to try to get this thing done. And it also requires me to do a lot of setup. Taking a good look at the studio from my point of view, where I sit and what hardware is hooked up, how the modules are laid out. Usually when I'm preparing to put them into the rack and demonstrate them, a view of the where the GoPro mounts and the shotgun microphone I use, and of course the light. There's a light up on top that lights the rack white. Usually I have the red and blue lights on either side to just cast that little, hopefully my little signature glow onto this small rack. For this video, as you can see, I'm using the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K camera and my new GVM lights, which I'm using plain white and then a little wall bounce for some blue, just to give it a little bit of color here on the screen. And then you can see I'm recording to Pro Tools. It usually comes out of the rack over here on the right side, using the outs module. Looking back again at the Blackmagic camera, using a 4K TV, little 40-inch television as my monitor so I can see when my fat gut is entering the frame, and make sure that does not happen because that is unsightly. We do not need to see that. And then this is the studio. This is like a pan view of the whole studio. My kitchen is back there. This is literally my house. And yep, that's the music studio. The rest of the music studio is right there. Then I have another little video here just showing some of the cables that I have laying on the standby, and of course my electronics duster, and then how things are set up. And this is just showing that I use the GoPro, which I already did, so I probably don't need to put that in here as well. GoPro Hero 9, and how it sits, mounts right there, and looks at the rack. I guess I begin in the fact that normally before I start shooting videos, I do like to clean things off a little bit. Have you ever noticed sometimes you watch people's videos and they zoom up really close to their modules and there's just all this dust all over the top of everything? Unsightly. So I do try to clean my stuff, especially if I'm going to do close-ups on anything. I do want things to be clean. Before I get into the rack build, let's talk about the studio and how things are set up normally for modular journey videos, and that is using this GoPro Hero 9. Mounts right here. And then of course I adjust as needed. I've got this little adjustment here. I've got the overall angle here. And of course we cock it back and forth and find the frame. When I'm ready to do that, we'll do that. So I just have this USB cable coming from the desk over here, and I usually wrap it around here. I mean, you can't see this in the normal videos because this is the camera. This is the camera that's being used. So once I get this AC power plugged in, I can plug out my battery. There's a little SD card sitting right here that stores the footage, and then we turn on the camera. All right, and then I spend the next 16 hours trying to frame the GoPro to be able to see the whole rack. All right, so that was the setup of the GoPro, which is the actual thing that films my modular journey right here. I don't know why I'm getting a funny landscape here. My linear seems to be off, and I don't know why, but I'm just going to move forward. All right, so at this point, I'm going to actually turn on the GoPro to record. So now it is running recording, and now you'll be able to see the usual layout of how things look on my modular journey. The first thing I usually need is a clock. So in this case, I have the clock, which is Pamela's new workout. This is way more than just a clock. Go check out the episode to find out what it's all about. Getting into how to build the rack from nothing to something. Obviously, the first thing you need is a module and its power cord. So you can see there's a little 5-pin and a 10-pin end here. Depending on how nice your manufacturer of your bus board is, things could be keyed. Like in my case, the Behringer rack has these little notches right here. So you can only plug this cable in one way. I think that's probably lesson number 1, is how to plug things in. Because see how it says right here, red. So there's a little red wire here. You have to make sure you plug the red in to the red side. Reversing this could damage the module, could damage the bus board. It could harsh your vibe. It's something you don't want to do, so just be careful plugging things in. That's as simple as that. Usually they say red or minus 12 volts is the red lead here. Some of the modules, like Ornament and Crime, depending on whose version you purchase, this one happens to be a Mr. Siri version, but here it says, there's little words right here that say, I don't know if you can see that, it says either way. Either way. So that means there is no right or wrong way to put the cable on this one. So sometimes they do it that way. That's convenient. But for most of the modules, you actually have to do the red negative 12. So first things first, we're going to plug this into the bus board over here. Untangle our wire. So we're going to take a couple of nuts. In my case, I happen to have sliding nuts in this Behringer case. I have learned to hate sliding nuts because if you build your whole rack and then take out a module, all the nuts are over there. It makes it a real pain in the ass to get some new nuts over there. So, yes. Oops. Going back to my first video where I couldn't find the hole. Oh, Yep, that just happened. All right. So Pamela's is at least now secured in the rack. And that's it. That's how you would plug in a module, get it some power, and then get it secure in the rack. I'm going to tighten these in a moment, but I'm going to shove Pamela's down to the end where you can't see it on the GoPro. But first, let's turn on power. And there you go. We have our first module powered up. Ta-da! Turn the power back off. Like I said, I'm moving Pamela's all the way down here to the end, and I'm tucking her wires in nicely to get out of the way of everybody. So again, usually the first thing I throw in here is the clock, because the clock is used for everything. Now the other thing that's used for everything is the outs module. Now outs, if you recall, is how you bring all of your sounds from all over the rack, come into a stereo left and right here, and then they come out of the stereo left and right to your DAW or your amplifier or whatever, however you're listening to it, or your headphones. If you want to use headphones, you have a headphone pot here. And this is another one that's nicely keyed. You can only put it in one way. So see, if you try to put it in the other way, it won't work. But if you were my dad, you would probably get a grinder out and shave this little nipple off and get it in there. But we're not going to do that today, because then we'd blow everything up. So this is another one, goes all the way to the end. I usually drop it to the lower right because it's the last thing. So in this case, in this Behringer rack, they were nice enough to put some buses downward, so the things that are going in the bottom rack have an easier way of powering. Very nice. Very nice. Thank you, Behringer. I guess I should mention one real quick thing, even though this was also covered in a previous video. I want to talk about these beautiful little knurlies here. So they have a hex head, so a little hex torque type looking wrench can fit right in there. It also will handle a flat blade, like or a Phillips head, I believe. But this is why I like these mostly. Is they got a little bit of meat to grab onto, so you can actually turn them with your finger. And the best part for me is these little rubber washers that are on here, because then it keeps you from generating what they call rack rash. And I don't know if I have an example of rack rash, because I started really being careful about this. Oh, here's a perfect example. Data. So my first few months of doing modular, I was using barbaric bolts to put these in here, and you could see what has happened. The bolt, when I tightened it down, would just rub the paint off, and I believe that is what these guys refer to as rack rash. So try to avoid that. Moving on to the next thing. The next thing to everything leaving the rack is how you get everything to leave the rack. And I usually use something called a mixer. And that's here's a 4-channel stereo mixer. So this is left, right, left, right, left, right, all the way down, or 8 monos that will automatically pan left and right. Or you could put just mono, 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 and it actually normals it to left and right to put out a mono signal. So all the signals come in, and then they leave here, out, see, out, and they go to here, in, and then everything leaves out here and goes into the DAW. So let's get our mixer mounted. There's another interesting point. When this thing is running, wherever your power supply is going to be pretty warm. So when I do lay out my modules in the rack, I try to come up with the ones that are like the least heavy to be sitting on this side of the rack where the power supply is going to be. In this case, because it's a demo rack, I'm not really abiding by that rule because, for instance, the quad precision oscillator is quite a beast, and it's going to literally be sitting right here over the power supply. So I'm breaking a rule, but that's okay. Be wary of where you put things, not only for amperage load, but also for heat buildup. All right, so now we have a clock over here. I have a stereo mixer here that comes out to the outs here that goes out to the DAW. So the next guy next to the clock is going to be a random trigger gate, and this just basically takes a clock signal and then generates random triggers and gates randomly. It randomly does that randomly. And again, red is down on this one. And in this case, you know red is down because it says so right here. It says red. This is the S090 skipper. So this is a probability skipper. What this one does is it takes a clock signal in, and then depending on how random, this is 0%, this is 100%, so naturally this would be 50%. It will 50% of the time maybe generate a gate or a trigger out. So, and it's times 2, it's got 2 channels. It isn't a guarantee that 75% of the time it's going to. It's a probability that 75% of the time it might. So I love this module. I love this module so much I bought a second one. Next up is a guy called Modbox, and Modbox is a modulation tool. It has 3 LFOs, so sine wave LFOs or triangle or ramp down. It also has a skew, sample and hold, and noise. So it's a modulation source. This little tool is used in every patch because it has, it's also got phased. It's 3 phased. So each one of the LFOs is offset by itself, 0 degrees, 120 degrees, 240 degrees. So all that means is that it just runs at different cycles to make things even more random. It's pretty awesome. So what I've just built over here on this left side is kind of what I call the clocks or randoms section. All of my racks have one of these because I want the clock source, the heartbeat. I want the random triggers, and I want the probability skippers, and then I want the modulation source, which is usually an LFO. So this is all about modulations next, so I can't keep all these things together. So the noisemakers wind up being in the middle, you know, down here, or the sequencers. Usually I put sequencers at the bottom because my hands are working them, but up here in the top is usually where the voices or filters or things like that go. So I just wanted to cover that real quick to show my organization of why things are the way they are. Our next guy is Ornament and Crime. So this little guy is a powerhouse. It is absolutely amazing how much stuff this little module can do, and it has 2 or more firmwares. So even the stock firmware with just 13 apps in it does amazing things. I use this primarily for envelopes because it has amazing envelope power in the Peaked app. It also has another firmware called Hemispheres that puts 50 plus, and being added all the time, 50, that's 50 applications inside this one little module. And it's called Hemispheres. It actually splits the module in half, so you can have one app over here and one app over here doing 2 separate things entirely. It's pretty amazing. This is the one that lets you plug it in either way. So I'm taking a relatively short cable. I'm going to plug it in right here to the top. And then whatever the natural bend of the cable is, I just plug it in there. Another module from season 1 that I use in this season 2 is, of course, the data, because it is an oscilloscope. It is a voltage monitor. It's kind of amazing. It's a little bit of a Swiss Army knife in a way. It's got a lot of things in it. I mostly use it just for the oscilloscope or for tuning or whatnot. Data also has a bigger cable because it requires some 5 volt, not just the negative and positive 12 volt, but it also requires some 5 volt action here. So it has a bigger, fatter cable here. And so we're going to plug that in here. It just plugs straight into these 2 because all these bus boards have negative, positive 12 and 5 volts feeding them. So here's where the sliding nuts are a problem, because I'm going to put 4 screws in here to hold this in place, but then I can't slide any more nuts over. So this means I have to know in advance how many nuts I'm going to need over here. It's a big pain in the ass. So this is why my newer rack now has threaded nut strips, so that way there's no sliding. It's just a nice little threaded rod. So let's take 5 nuts and just slide them on over here to get them over there for the future. Then I'm going to take the 4 nuts I need for data and put them right here. All right. And then the last piece from season 1 is the quad VCA, the A135-2. This is 4 channels of VCA, CV audio in, out, or summed. And I use this to wrangle in the 4 voices coming out of this. So this is going to sit way over here at the right. Next up on the right side down here at the bottom, we're going to put in the Endorphins Golden Master. And what this thing is, it is a mastering module. So it's a 3-band EQ and compressor, and it also has a stereo field widening capability. So that's kind of neat. All right, and then the very next module is going to be the Endorphins Milky Way, and this is an effects module. It has 2 banks of 8 effects each, so it's 16 effects, or DSP, digital signal processing, that can go on in here. Coming up next here is the steps module. So this is a random burst generator. It can do bursts of 8 notes randomly or in 8 steps in a pattern. It can also loop, so you can do 8 steps in a loop or 8 random steps in a loop. It's pretty cool. Now we have Popple, which is a filter. So this is a cutoff resonance. It's got these left and right attenuators, all this, a lot of stuff. This is actually a season 2 module, so you can probably go back and watch the video to see what this really does. But it's got great band pass, low pass, and low pass 2, low pass 4 pole filtering out of it. So it's pretty neat. It's a great little filter module. This might be important. The Behringer Go case has 3 zones. So it's got this A zone, see the white line? It's got a B zone cut here, and then a C zone over here. Each one of these zones is 1,000 milliamps or 1 amp. So you can plug in up to 3,000 milliamps of stuff in here and it's not run out of power. The power supply handles that much power, and it's split into 3 zones. So in other words, you don't want to put 2,000 amps on A. You don't want to put 1,500 amps on B, things like that. You do want to do 1,000 or less, 1,000 or less, or 1,000 or less. So that's kind of why I'm piling things up the way I am. All right, and then the last thing for the bottom is going to be the Zagreb filter. We just did an episode on. So this is the last thing for season 2 that has been added to the rack. For a lot of the episodes for season 2, I've been using this quad precision VCO by Dofer, which hasn't had his own episode yet, but it's coming soon. And for that one, it's another one it's a pretty beefy module. Oh, just real quick, it's got 4 oscillator channels, CV in or modulation in. It's got 3 waves out, triangle, saw, pulse, and then sync capabilities. And it's pretty neat. It's a pretty simple, basic analog oscillator, but that's what I wanted. I wanted something that was just going to make some amazing sounds. And the fact that this has 4 voices means either polyphony or a really fat sound. So that's why I chose this particular module, which we'll cover in its episode when it gets aired. Two more I almost forgot about because I took them off the screen. So this guy is the attenuverter from earlier this season as well. So it's going to go over here in the modulation sources because you're kind of using it to control the voltages over here. So this is another one that is red exclamation point. Red exclamation point. So we'll put this guy here. Before I seal this all up, let me plug in a couple more cables for the future coming down like this. So this is usually my little demo space down here, so I like to have a cable down here for that. And then this is going to now seal this up here. We're going to close this up. And truly last but not least, time warp. All right, so this one I'm going to stick here because I know what's coming. I know what's going to fill in this spot here. And I only need one here, so that's how this is going to go. Let's see. This one is power. So WMD, which is the same thing as this over here. WMD likes saying power on one side and then throwing you off by putting a -12 on the opposite side of the word power. So don't let them trick you. Why the hell does my arm look so weird on the camera? I promise that is not there on in real life. I don't know what's going on there. All right, so this is literally the demo rack. This is as far as I've gotten in season 2 so far. What's coming up next, which I'm not going to mount these in just right now because I still need to do their episodes. But coming up this season will be the Allen, which is a Turing machine, Allen Turing. We have Morecom and Enigma, which are expansions for Allen. The Spherical Wavetable Navigator, so that's an oscillator. The Castor and Pollux, which is also an oscillator. Those are coming up. The next episode that I'm about to film is going to be this Geranalog filter. Down the road towards the end is going to be this beautiful Winter Modular Eloquencer. And then eventually also the Melodicer, Ramona Melodicer. Also the Endorphins Queen of Pentacles, which is a drum synthesizer. And then finally, Bitbox. And as you can see, these don't all fit in here, so there's going to be some shuffling around as I'm producing the demos moving forward. So they don't all fit, like literally one U, one U off. So yes, so this is going to be the end of season 2. Will be with these modules you see right here, right now. I wasn't really sure I was going to do this part, but playing around with it a little bit, I decided, let's round this off nicely after showing how I built the rack. Now let's make some noise with it real quick. The thing of it is there's so much you can do with modular. Honestly, nothing is real quick because everything leads to something else, and that's why I am so fascinated by it. That's why I'm so into it, and that's why I've spent a lot of money buying modules and building racks, is because it just keeps growing and it's wonderful. So for this part of this video, I did hijack another thing out of the main modular rack. This is a buffered mult. I didn't talk about that a moment ago, but all that means is that you can put in a CV here and get a copy of it without losing any signal. I'm also going to try using an iPhone over here for a close-up, but no promises. We'll see how that works. The first thing I want to do is let me tune my oscillator. And I'm not going to put you through the pain and agony of listening to that because it is a lot of noise. I'm just going to pick a triangle wave over here and get things to at least be the same pitch for all 4 oscillators. So I also have things tuned up and then in the middle and then down on some of them. You'll see as I go forward with some of this. So that's why you see the tuning changing here from C1 to C2 to C0. So what I want to do at the very end here is set up how is it going to leave the rack. I have a 1/4 inch left and right that's just going to simply go out to the DAW. So this goes out of here to my Mackie mixer, which is what Pro Tools is listening to for sound. As I said a little bit earlier, all the sounds come down the board until they reach the mixer, and then once they get into the mixer, we can come out of the mixer and go into effects and all kinds of other things. So let me build some of that real quick first. So I'm going to come out of my mixer, and I'm going to come into the effects box. Then I'm going to come out of the effects box into the master, the golden master. And then we come out of the master, finally, into the outs module. And outs is the thing that's going to take us into Pro Tools. So now, whatever I plug in here will now be processed by, it'll get effects, it'll get EQ'd, compressed, and then it'll get amplified and sent out. And I can show what that sounds like real quick by just hooking one thing up. Let me take a saw out of the oscillator, turn up the master here, turn up the mix here. So hear the effect. So that's it. That's all there is to it. So now I'll pull this out, and now I'm going to build the rest of the circuits the way they're supposed to be. So for this particular demo, I'm going to take 4 saws out of this quad VCO, this quad voltage controlled oscillator. Here are 4 saws. So you see how these are 4 oscillators. Bottom left one here is a saw, whereas this one's a triangle. And I'm going to come right over here to the VCA, and I'll just plug those all straight into the audio input row here, just like that. plugging this into 1, plugging this into 2. Things are conveniently in 4s. I kind of like that. And then this into 3, and then this last one into 4. And now I'm going to crank up all the 4 mixers all the way up. And now, in order to hear them without anything triggering them to open, I'm just going to open one at a time. So there's that one. There's the second row. There's the third row. There's the fourth row. I can tell it's different by changing the frequency. All right, so you get the idea there. So now all 4 of my oscillators are coming into their VCA. Now you want to know how to trigger them to come on and go off, right? So this is how we're going to do that. I'm going to reach over here. I'm going to grab these 2 cables here come from the System 8 down below. This is pitches, is the black one. I'm not going to use that yet. And then the white one is gates. So for gates, I'm going to stick it right here into this mult real quick. And just for a temporary demo, I'm going to now come out of this mult 4 times, and I'm going to plug it into the VCA here. What this gate CV does is now I'm going to push a note on the System 8. So watch the little light. Every time I press a note, the light blinks. That means the gate's open, the gate's closed. And so now I've just told the VCA over here to open and close when I press it, when the gate's high. So in order to hear it, you have to turn up the CV amounts. So I'll turn up the first one, then I'll turn up the second one, then I'll turn up the third one, then I'll turn up the fourth one that I'm already holding. All right. So now if we throw them all up max, all this means is now you're going to hear all 4 voices at once, and it winds up being a pretty gigantic sound. Now you can see I'm playing notes on the keyboard, but there's no pitches being changed because there's nothing going in here to change the pitch. So for that, I'm just going to take this pitches out of the System 8, and I'm going to put it down here in the bottom, which is the global volt per octave for all 4 oscillators. So this pitch in is now going to change the pitch of all 4 of these oscillators. So now I'm going to press the key. Oof. So now you can see all 4 oscillators are out of tune, because now I've plugged something into their CV jack, and the voltage coming out of the keyboard is changing everything. The point of all that is, for this demo, I'm going to use the System 8. I'm going to use its sequencer to do a sample here. And so this is what this sequence sounds like that you're going to hear for the next 20 minutes. And you see the System 8 has a gate control down here, so you can make them triggers or hold the gate open longer. But I don't want to use his gates. So what we're going to do instead is I'm going to leave pitches in here for a moment. I'm going to take this gate out. I'm going to come over here to this envelope generator, and that is the ornament in crime I was bragging about earlier. And now I'm going to wire up a shload of envelopes coming out of here. So 4. So, and as you can tell, I love being color-coded, because one thing that happens here is things get a little messy because you wind up with so many wires plugged in. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to plug in this envelope, and actually let me turn on the sequence first so you don't hear anything because there's no envelope. So look back over here at the ornament in crime. You could see this. This is the gate coming from the System 8, telling these envelopes to trigger every time a note is played. And then now I'm going to take that envelope and I'm going to plug it into voice number 1. So this envelope just happens to be very sharp. So I can change that. But we'll leave it sharp for now. So now let's plug in all the other 3. Get that back in tune a little bit. So what I have now is I have pitches going into the oscillator. I have sound coming out to the VCA getting envelopes, shapes of attack and decay being driven by the gates coming out of the System 8. So this is kind of how you start building, and it, believe me, it all goes downhill from here. For example, instead of coming out of the VCA and going directly to the mixer, I want to come down here to a filter. Out of the filter, let's go on up to the mixer. All right, but the envelope is really short. See that? So if I want to hear it anyway, I just turn up this initial gain over here. So now the filter is a thing that can shape the sound. So you're basically taking harmonics out, which is, I believe the term is subtractive synthesis. You're using the filter to take some of the sound away, filtering it out. So now you have this, but you don't always want to sit here turning knobs by hand, do you? So you use an LFO. So this LFO is called Modbox. And I'm going to use this fancy cable here. This fancy cable called a LED cable. I'm going to take one of the LFOs out. You can see that see how it's changing colors? That means it's getting different voltages. And so now I'm going to stick it in here to FM1. So now as fast as this LFO is being set over here, this is now opening and closing this cutoff frequency. So let's speed up the LFO. We can also change the shape, like a ramp down. So when the LFO starts, it's at the top of its voltage and then it slowly goes down based on its speed. So that's an interesting effect there. Let me grab another LED cable, and I'm going to take another thing out of Modbox, and I'm going to plug it into the spread section of Zagreb. I'm going to speed that up a little bit. So it's a little sample and hold. So you can kind of hear it messing with the sound. At a pretty high rate of speed. So now if we turn on our sequence again, so also with the filter you can turn up resonance to get it to start squawking a little bit. So you're basically just shaping your sound at this point. And remember, this is just one of the voices. This is just one of the oscillators coming out of here. So let me grab a second one. I'm going to take the second channel, the second voice, out and put it into the... I don't even know what the hell I did that for. that was dumb. Oh boy. Oscillators 1 and 2 are now going into Zagreb. They're coming out to a stereo pair in the mixer, and we'll listen to what that sounds like. So that's two of the voices. There's still two more to go. So what I'm going to do with the last two is I'm going to go into a different filter. So again, out of 3 and 4 now, and I'm going to come around here to the Popple has a left and a right, in left and in right. And then I want to wire Popple up to the mixer. I'm going to use the low pass 4 pole down here at the bottom. Let's put them into channel 3. And now we have all 4 oscillators making noise. Start the sequence. So I can actually turn off number 1 and 2 by just taking its filter down. Or quieting its mixer. And so now we're into Popple here. Raise its resonance, lower its cutoff. So I want to do something like this with these 3rd and 4th oscillators. So to do that, let's grab another trusty LED cable. I'm going to come out of the 3rd phase of Modbox, and I think just to show off the mult, I'm going to throw that in there, and then I'll take the output. I'll take copies of it. I'm going to put it into this FM here. This FM left and FM right. So what this is going to do now is this LFO is going to sweep, and it's going to change the cutoff based on whatever I set these attenuators to. So bring in the other voices. It's a little loud. Let's bring them down. Got some crackling going on. All right, so there's that. One of the things I really enjoy doing the most with filters is patching, like self-patching themselves back in. So I'll take like a band pass out of Popple and put it into its cutoff. Or maybe I'll put it into Zagreb's FM2. So now this guy's output voltage is now affecting the other guys. So 3 and 4 is affecting 1 and 2. That's kind of cool. So again, this is how I'm saying this just keeps going and keeps going, and you literally can almost never run out of shit to do. Honestly, I spend hours, I spend days sitting here messing with this kind of stuff. For the last thing that I'll probably show you is because I made such a big deal about random trigger and skipper, I'm going to wire something up here real quick. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these little shorties. I want to take a clock out of Pamela's. Is that the right one? Yes, I'm going to take a clock out of Pamela's to clock here. And then I'm going to take a gate out of random trigger into probability. I'm going to come out of the probability skipper over here to this time warp. I'm going to plug it into the gate because we're going to do something fun here. So what I want to do right now is also change these pitches to be back the way they were before. I'm going to take blue, this is channel 2, channel 3, channel 4. So all I did was I took the global one out and I'm replacing it with this. So it still plays the same sound, but now oscillator 1 has no pitches. So what I want to do with oscillator 1 is, so I'm going to come out of the pitches mult to the input of time warp. Now remember, time warp was the episode you just saw, because I know you watch all these. Then I'm going to come out of time warp over here into the pitches. So now the theory is, if I, let me start the sequence. So let me turn off all the other oscillators real quick. So there's oscillator 1. And right now it's not doing any slewing because I don't have it turned on. So let me turn this on. So now I'm forcing it to be slewed. But I don't want it to be slewed every single note. So that's why we put it in this gated mode, and then we turn on a clock. Now the clock is pulsing into random trigger. Random trigger will trigger something here occasionally, which will then trigger here, and then based on the probability, the second one, or this gate will open or close. And when the gate opens, we slew. When the gate closes, we don't. Let me turn up the probability high. So I'm just disabling the filter for a moment. So if you keep an eye on this light, you hear there's normal notes until the light goes on, then it does slews. So now let's bring in the other voices. And that is really it. I mean, this is just the tail end of the building the rack end to end that I've been requested a couple of times to do something like this. So I thought I'd throw the whole rack together because I'm about to start recording the second half of season 2. So we're ready to start the recordings for the Jor Analog Filter 8. That should be coming up next. And as long as we're here, I went ahead and did this quick patch just to show you how things do get wired up once you do have everything in your modular. This is barely scratching the surface of the things you can do with modular, but it is still so much fun. It is so much fun to make noises, and even if it's just melodic and what you hear now, even though it's still music-ish, it's just fun. It's a whole lot of fun, and that's the whole point. So if you're not having fun with it, sell your stuff and go play a video game. That's my advice. All right, so that's it. I hope you enjoyed this. I don't know that it taught anybody anything, but it kind of was refreshing to walk through this once again, unscripted, and just go put something together and see what happens. And I'm probably going to cut out about an hour's worth of this stuff. But anyway, thanks for watching. If you stayed through the end, thank you for watching. If you didn't, then you didn't hear me say thank you. So bye-bye.